So talking about Palestine, it seems that in light of the humanitarian catastrophe that was and continues to be inflicted on Gaza, that the most natural thing would be to campaign for the human rights in Gaza. You'd think that it is quite innate in our nature, it's quite intrinsic to us to speak out and to mobilize and to organize in order to reveal the real crisis, what's happening, and what needs to happen in order to restore humanity to the kind of catastrophe that it was inflicted upon Gaza. But from what I understand, that the university scene, which during my time and even after my time, I mean, the university scene in the UK was one of the most open spaces, one of the most thriving, independent, one of the most active. I recall when I first started my political awareness, it was South Africa. I mean, this was before your times, but during that time, the anti-apartheid global movement was in its element. And we were listening to the news from South Africa coming about the activities of the ANC and about how there was someone in prison called Nelson Mandela. And Britain and the British university scene, the student movement, was instrumental in actually bringing down the apartheid regime, the whole blockade, the whole sanctions against South Africa, and the protests against government policy, which at the time was quite friendly with the apartheid regime in Johannesburg. But that was the scene that I became, involved with politics at the time of. And then on during the times of Iraq, during Bosnia, that particular scene was quite active. It was dynamic. But it seems that now things have changed somewhat.
I mean, during my university time, just within the couple of years that have just passed, we relied on that fact that our universities historically experienced those periods in which, the campaigns for awareness, the campaigns against apartheid, the campaigns against different forms of oppression existed in those university halls, in those corridors. And we thought, a pro-Palestine campaign or any political campaign today would go through the same journey and would be respected by the university, because we think universities are, they're a center for thought and freedom of thought and the exchange of thought, etc. And I think we started to see signs that things were changing, but I don't think I personally expected
Around
it.
what time was that?
2009, I think between 2019 and 2021, those 2 years, that's when we started seeing a lot of challenges. There were challenges before, definitely, but it became a bit more blatant. I can give some examples. During the 2018 Great Return March in Gaza, we went out to the University Square and we posted names of every single civilian killed. And we had some societies at the university who complained about us. We were the City University Friends of Palestine. So they complained about us and they accused us of glorifying terrorism. And, I think any wise or sane academic or staff in the university would have just looked at the list and did a fact check and say, these accusations are ridiculous. But instead they called us in for a disciplinary meeting.
Wow.
And it went on from there. And I think that was a first sign that things were no longer the way they are. And I think the grip was just tightening and tightening. I mean, we sat down with the president of the university, and he mentioned that in his time, at his generation, they were involved in anti-apartheid campaigns, and that they were there, they were protesting, they were causing the noise. So we were sitting there and we were like, this is quite ironic, given that you are now the one restricting us and deciding the terms on how we express ourselves. So it brings back those memories.
But why? I mean, why? I mean, the question is, wouldn't it be in everyone's best interest, particularly the young scene, the youth scene, the student scene, is allowed to thrive, is allowed to be dynamic, is allowed to engage in intellectual, political, ideological debate. Is it not? I mean, what's happening? Why is that?
Ilan Pape is always talking about this fact, who's an Israeli historian, who's anti-Israeli apartheid. He always say that we in this community, we are policed by the universities, by the police, by the government, by the companies, by the NHS, by everyone. So he said, we've been policed. So he said, our rule, we live here in this country, we need to speak about the fundamental issues which the Palestinian face. So, for example, we can start talking about the Balfour Declaration, how Britain's rule in building this occupation, then about the Nakba, then about the continuous. And as we can see, just last April, Israel and the UK have signed something called Israel-UK Roadmap, which is a very unique, it has not been done before. And within this roadmap, they have stated that British Parliament and Israeli Parliament will be collaborating together. UK universities and UKs in Israel will be collaborating together. So the British government is putting monies to the British Parliament to force them to work with the Israeli Parliament. And they don't do with any other parliament, with any other universities. And if you see this, there is something called UK universities, which have more than 160 universities. I have written to them, say, do you know that the universities you are supporting in Israel are built in my grandmother land, in the Israeli settlements and in other areas? And they said, we are really sorry. And after the deadline, they changed their criteria, saying they did not ban working with universities which have campuses in the settlements, because all Israeli universities have campuses and places in the Israeli illegal settlement. So they did not say this because then they will not have any university within this criteria. They said, we allow universities in Israel to work with the Palestinians within these funded projects after the deadline have passed. What I'm trying to say is they don't care about the facts. They don't care about supporting the Israeli occupation and apartheid. And when you complain to them, they send you something doesn't make any sense. So after the deadline has passed, they say, we allow Israeli universities to work with Palestinian universities using this fund, which doesn't make any sense because it's impossible.
I mean, these moves, these shifts, these changes, are they politically driven? Are they enforced upon universities? I mean, is it that universities don't really have a choice? Is it that it'll, for instance, impact its recruitment drive? I mean, what is it?
I think this is a topic that's started to be discussed a bit more lately, but actually it goes back to maybe 2009, 2010. And it starts with the prevent strategy. The British government introduced, let's call it a counter-extremism / counter-terrorism strategy to try and root out any form of extremism or any form or any roots to extremism in the education sector as well as the professional sector. And I don't think we saw the implementations until a later stage in the decade. So it was probably, I think maybe with the flare-ups in Syria and different other events, I think they've pushed people and you started to see more happening in the UK. It's because of the prevent strategy that things like the disciplinary meeting that happened at my university happened. It's also why, for example, if we were to invite yourself or other academics to our universities, we'd have to do, let's say, a slightly rigorous process to get you approved as a speaker, because they're going to go and do a background check and see, well, where do they stand when it comes to the prevent strategy, and can they be of somewhat an extremist or in their ideology an extremist, and that used to hinder us in everything we do. When we wanted to do an event, we couldn't do it spontaneously, even if the situation was an emergency. If there was an emergency and we wanted to raise awareness about something and we wanted a good speaker, it would take ages. It would take around at least 4 weeks for a speaker approval, and now it takes probably longer. In schools now, people can't. I think because of the recent events in Gaza, a lot of teachers have been warning students about doing anything or speaking out within the school system. We didn't have that when we were in school. I mean, I finished school in 2015. I don't remember any issue with being vocal. And it just keeps going on. I don't think it never was there. It was always there.
Yeah.
It just took a change in the circumstances and in the geopolitical scene to actually get the real face to show. At the time, I think this kind of links to other things. This links to the fact that, the government had a very friendly or slightly friendly approach with the so-called Islamists.
Yeah.
And those who attributed to the Muslim Brotherhood. But now it's a completely shut case. Did they actually change? I think they were just dealing with the fact that there was a reality that they had to deal with. The fact that Mohamed Morsi was in power in Egypt changed things for this government. And as a result, their attitude changed. But now, because the reality is completely different, they're able to be more comfortable with their real face. And it's an establishment at the end of the day.
Would I be correct in saying that despite these restrictions, despite these sort of clampdowns on various events, and I'm going to come to BDS, for instance, and trying to talk about BDS and campaign for BDS, but am I right in saying that despite that the numbers of those who are sympathetic to the Palestinians, that are pro-Palestinian, that are willing to, work or join a Palestinian group or a pro-Palestinian group, are on the rise?
Of course, yeah. I mean, we have seen just last week, we have seen the British Home Secretary talking about raising a Palestinian flag could be a crime. And then a few days later, we have seen more than 150,000 people, some people say 250,000 people, raising the Palestinian flag in the British capital in London. And we have seen the BBC reporting that some demonstrations or protests in London has been promoting some Palestinian political parties or resistant party, then they apologize. Yes, so answering your question, yes. Although these restrictions, these threats, these sanctions to the pro-Palestinian activists, we have seen a very huge number of people speaking out loudly. And just I have seen a petition by more than 7,500 NHS workers.
Yes.
They were calling the NHS and the Department of Health to be more clear about its position, because when the war started, they standed with Israel and they did not care about the 1,000 children, Palestinian who killed in Palestine, in Gaza. So what I'm trying to say is now we have seen a huge number of people who are not following the mainstream media. So people do not take their information from the mainstream media. I don't want to mention names, but we all know the names. People don't trust these mainstream media. People are taking their information from the people in Palestine, from the accurate sources which they can find in the social media or in other places. So now what's happening now? The government, the NHS, all the, as Elan said, policing the pro-Palestine, yes, we can see this happening. And we can talk later about the anti-BDS bill. We can speak about the BDS movement. We can speak about...
let's talk about the BDS movement. I mean, again, the BDS movement was something that was introduced during the South African struggle. And it proved extremely effective and quite impactful on the whole scene, and directly not only on the British scene in terms of mobilizing the British public against the apartheid regime, but also it's actually it's helped and assisted in bringing down the South Africa regime directly. And many of those who wrote their memoirs of the politicians of the old regime, as well as the new politicians that came after the ANC held power, they wrote in their books, they wrote that the British university scene and the BDS around the world was something that was instrumental in bringing down apartheid. So you would think that something like this was noble. It was, to fight for justice, because it's an economic means of struggle. And it's not military, it's not armed, it's non-violent. It's, when we talk about peaceful protest, peaceful struggle. The BDS should be the epitome of that. So why is it all of a sudden, why is it demonized in the case of Palestine?
Yeah, I think I have read the philosophies of BDS. I have seen their documents, and I think, as you mentioned, it's one of the most unique, movements, because it was founded by the majority of the Palestinian. As you mentioned, it wasn't a creative idea. It was copying what people in other struggles have done to have a peaceful, non-violent, collective way of talking about the occupation. However, what we have seen, the attack on the BDS movement shows that it's not about the Palestinian, how the Palestinian try to stop the occupation.
Yeah.
It's about without any kind of ethics to support the Israeli occupation. And let me give you 3 examples here. So in 2016, a group of councillors at Leicester Council, they have written a motion to the AGM, the council AGM. They say this council want to stop using Israeli settlements goods.
Yeah.
Just as simple as this. Then the government have forced them to revoke this bill. So the council have voted in favor of this bill to stop buying Israeli settlement goods. Then the government have stopped this. Then PSC and other organization,
PSC being Palestine Solidarity.
yeah, which is the biggest pro-Palestine advocacy organization for Palestine. Palestine Solidarity Movement have they went to the court. They have appealed about the government decision. Then the court have found the government is not true in stopping the council boycotting illegal Israeli settlement.
So it found against the government.
Yeah. Then the government have put an appeal. Then the High Court found that the government is guilty. And you will be surprised, the government have paid tens of thousands of pounds to the pro-Palestine PSC.
Wow.
So PSC is partially funded now by the British government because the government doesn't follow its own constitution. Now what we have seen, Michael Gove and the right-wing British government right now, they are trying to change the UK constitution. We know Britain doesn't have constitution. To change the UK laws to allow the government to ban anyone in any time to boycott Israel. So the government can allow any public bodies or
Like
bodies,
councils, etc.
councils, universities, hospitals, art councils, cinemas, anybody which is funded by public fund cannot boycott certain things. So it was totally illegal, the bill, which the UK is doing right now, and it was criticized by all the UK parties except the Conservative Party. The Labour Party did not say anything, which is unacceptable. But again, about the anti-BDS bill, the bill is meant just to target the activists and the bodies which target the Israeli occupation. And they said within the bill, no government in history can allow any boycott to the illegal Israeli occupation.
It's incredible. I mean, I've met people whom applied for employment in companies, whether private or public, and they, within the terms, is the fact that they have never been or they never will partake in any BDS campaign. Wow. I mean, it's quite frightening. I mean, especially that I'm presuming that the Palestinian campaigns on university campuses, for instance, or amongst the youth movements, I'm pretty sure that BDS is quite prominent.
Yeah, I mean, I think we took part in having stalls for BDS almost every week in term time. During the AGM, which is the annual general meeting that the student union would hold and the university would hold, we'd gather students and we'd get them to vote to get the student union to adopt a pro-BDS bill. And in that there were their own debates with those who are Zionist on campus, etc., who were trying to fight the bill. But it was a very normal thing. Some people didn't like it, but that's the way things work. Not everybody's going to like something.
Yeah.
And
That's the essence of debate.
Exactly, and
that's how a debate happens.
Exactly, and the freedom of speech is to be able to exchange those opinions and those thoughts. So yeah, we it was a very normal thing talking about BDS. I mean, we used to go out even in protests, and we'd say, "How do you spell justice?" And people would say BDS because that's pretty much the way we see it.
Yeah.
You know, peaceful, democratic, legal discourse that allows us to put those who are responsible for the theft, the murder, and the illegal occupation under the eyes of the law.
How did you respond to the claim that by forwarding or promoting BDS, you're actually hurting Palestinian workers on, in settlement farms?
Yeah.
Or
I mean, I think that's probably one of the most repeated arguments that we used to get, and the response is that actually, whoever you're claiming, so for example, whoever you're claiming is part of this, either aren't affected. Number one, so a lot of the time they have a broad claim that Palestinians are affected by it. They're not affected. Number two, BDS is a targeted campaign. It's targeted boycott, meaning it targets specific companies that present the highest contribution to illegal occupation. So I'll give you an example. So a lot of people, for example, will have a list to boycott things.
Yeah.
So some people boycott Coca-Cola. Some people boycott McDonald's. But actually, none of them are on the BDS list. Whereas HP is on the BDS list. I think Caterpillar. SodaStream. SodaStream is a very big one. I don't know if there's any changes to that.
And
but
Puma as well.
Puma as well. These are very big contributors to illegal occupation. So BDS thought about it in a strategic way. If you boycott everything under the sun,
it'll be almost impossible.
Exactly.
It won't work.
Exactly. And we live in a globalized world, and we live in the Western world or in a capitalist world where these businesses thrive, and to an extent we might even rely on it for so many different products. But if you target specific companies that have alternatives, not everyone has to buy a HP laptop.
If you allow me to comment on this as well, it's really hurting and funny in the same time. So we are talking about modern slavery. So Israel has killed these people, stolen their land, build settlements, and say, yes, guys, we own this manufacturer. We are going to sell the soda or whatever product we are selling now. You will be working as labor without any rights, without any anything. You are coming here, you will be sleeping in the street, and by saying we are boycotting this manufacturer, we are affecting the original owners of the land of this manufacturer. So definitely I would suggest boycotting all the settlement goods in the UK and everywhere. And there is something else which is not everyone knows, but within the Israeli law, they have put in every, the Palestinian land, if it is in West Bank, High Julan, in West Bank, anywhere, they call it as Israel.
Yeah.
And they force universities, manufacturers, and all big chains to have branches everywhere. So the Israeli government is forcing So if you have, for example, a food restaurant chain, you have to open within the Israeli settlement. Yes. So what I'm saying that every Israeli company is complicit in the Israeli government policies, stealing the Palestinian land, and with this, what I described as the modern slavery to the Palestinian workers.
How effective do you think is, the mainstream media? Because people like myself, we're used to, watching the BBC or Sky or Channel 4 News or CNN or Reuters, for instance. But I take it, I take it from my sons, for instance, they have a different media stream from which they take their information, their knowledge of what's going on. How is the media, how is the interaction with the media and the kind of news that emerged, particularly from Palestine, and how does that feed into the whole understanding of what's happening, the appreciation of events that are unfolding in Palestine and the struggle for freedom and the like? And how is that then impacting and affecting young people?
I think there's a couple reasons for why maybe there's a lack of engagement between young people and these mainstream outlets. I think over a period of time, you know, initially I grew up watching these outlets, these mainstream outlets. They were like, you know, the you know, like the big thing, the big companies that present you the news and present you all the stories from the world, the truth, and so on. But as social media grew and as social media advanced and evolved, you were able to now get access to the source without this media, without this intermediary. So the BBC and other outlets will tend to bring that source and then spin it the way they want, spin it to the foreign policy of the government they represent, especially if they're the flagship, let's say, media outlet. It's a bit less with the private ones, but generally speaking, you'd see that there's a spin. And, you know, I think we're less patient as an age group. We want the truth as, you know, in the way that it is, in the graphic way that it is, no matter what. And therefore, we tend to rely on Twitter or Telegram group chats, or even now, people start posting things on TikTok, but TikTok and Instagram are a bit more controlled than Twitter. But we've seen the imbalance, and these current events that are happening, and the Israeli onslaught on Gaza, wasn't the first time this has happened, where big outlets have spun the narrative to suit the oppressor, the aggressor, and to kind of overlook the victim or overlook the victims of this onslaught. And so I think right now I mean, I can say for myself as well, I don't wait for the BBC to tell me what happened. I don't need that, because I know I can't unfortunately trust that source. We're careful. We watch what the BBC says, but we make sure to complain. We make sure to use the outlets of sending letters of complaint. We look at other sources to cross-reference. But if we were to rely completely on, you know, British media outlets as a source of truth, then we'd probably not be campaigning or on the streets protesting.
How do non-Arabs generally, how do they respond to what they're hearing about? I mean, I'm going to presume here that the majority of people, they're not Zionists.
Yeah.
They're not driven by, you know, some sort of affinity or identity, loyalty or the such to Israel or to Palestine in that matter.
Yeah.
They're mere observers, and they make their minds up regarding who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah.
How do you see the engagement of the youth with the narrative regarding Palestine?
Yeah, you will be surprised that lots of nation by heart, they are with Palestine. So when you talk about, for example, South African people, like I receive lots of calls, and like I have lots of friends here who are white or black South African and who stand with Palestine because they understand what it means by living under an apartheid government. And you will be surprised that people from Sri Lanka, people like, you know, some people are Sikh who have suffered from some like Hindu groups who were supported by Israel. We are supported by lots of like Indian people who suffered by the support of Israel to some things. But most importantly, the ordinary people who do not have these kind of, like in the back of their head, like, you know, like kind of suffering because of Israel.
Yeah.
The normal ordinary people, they can see how the Palestinians are being treated in the media, how the Palestinian voice has been silenced, how the Palestinian people have been treated. When we talk about, like, you know, in the UK here, if you have like, you know, 10 like, you know, old people, you will find 3 of them have served in Palestine, either in the medical or in the army. So people know the Palestine, they visit Palestine, and people are telling me how even the British churches are not mentioning that Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Palestine. They sometimes refer to it as the Holy Land and others. So I mean, religious people are supporting Palestine. People who have no like, you know, other, like, you know, thing which impact their opinion support Palestine. But in the same time, we have seen lots of people who have their ideas that these Israel is the democracy, the white people who live within these brown people, and there are some people who feels like, you know, that the Israelis are like similar to the British, that like maybe because they both are colonial, with full respect to the British people. But I mean, we all know, like, you know, I'm Irish Palestinian. Ireland has been under the British colonial and occupation. And do you know that Ireland was the first country to come under the British colonial regime 700-800 years ago? So Ireland was, so I mean, regarding the colonial history and this has some impact. Like, you know, some people say, yes, our British army has never been defeated, and we feel like, you know, we need to stand with Israel as it is our only allies there. And like, you know, we have seen, like, you know, in the previous days, the British like foreign minister, the British prime minister visiting Israel, and that's something Palestinian like, you know, feel that's hurt them, because to stand with the occupation. And one last thing, people do not see the media, as you mentioned, the media as the trusted place, because, for example, Israel has been warning the hospitals to be bombed in the last few days. No one has mentioned this.
Of course.
The World Health Organization have written lots of statements, UNICEF, UNRWA, no one have looked at this. Then now when we see in Israel bombed Al-Ahli, which is the Anglo Church hospital in Palestine, in Gaza, Israel warned the hospital, like warned the people in the UK, the church people, that they will bomb the hospital. And if you open the mainstream media or the news outlet, the day after that happened, no one has mentioned Israel have done this. So they all take the Israeli narrative. And when it comes, for example, when Biden was talking untruthfully about the 40 babies and the other, then he withdrawn this. All the mainstream media have covered this as this is a truth. What I'm trying to say, Palestinians have mentioned that Israel have warned the hospital to evacuate, bombed the hospital. No news outlet has said this.
Yes.
But when the Israelis, without any evidence, saying Palestinians have killed 40 babies, and all the mainstream media, so this make people do not trust the mainstream media.
And I mean, because we do need to talk about the Palestinian scene and what's happening there, and but I'd like to just touch on something which is now a known fact. Today, when any young person applies for employment, their background history, their social media history, their postings of, I don't know, since they were 14 years old, are all scoured through, and they're all checked. And often we've seen how people are taken to task over a tweet or a Facebook post or some sort of Insta post that they probably shared or retweeted or whatever 8, 10, 12 years ago. We had the incident of the elected NUS president, for instance, Shayma Dalali, who was hounded out of her position as a result of a tweet that she shared. It wasn't her tweet, when she was 17 years old, 10 years ago. And the same goes for people who applied for employment, but they were rejected on the basis that they had in their background that they had supported, a Palestinian campaign, for instance. And this is intimidating, I have to say. I mean, if I was a young person looking forward to pursuing my career, to working in my field of interest and the such, the fact that this could actually cost me my job is something which isn't... it's not an easy thing, is it?
Yeah, we live in a world we live in a side of the world that boasts its freedom and this world that lives with integrity and offers these freedoms and the flexibilities. But actually, we live in a world of hypocrisy, because while there might be someone young who posts something in favor of an element in Palestine or a group in Palestine or something that may be in somewhat way controversial, no one will say something to the young British person that would go to Israel, serve in the IDF, post pictures on social media proudly, on Twitter, get involved in bodies like the NUS. No one will say anything to that. Bearing in mind, I think I wanted to link this to something that you mentioned about the history and the colonial history of the of Britain. The founders of the Israeli state were terrorists in Britain's eyes.
Yes.
David Ben Gurion was involved in the several bombings that occurred, and the King David hotel bombing was one of the most devastating hits against
which killed British
soldiers.
officials.
British officials, British soldiers. And no one's apologized for that from the Israeli side. And the IDF continues to be a force that builds itself and is proud of its past, of its criminal and terrorist past and its terrorist present. Yet those who get involved don't get scolded. They don't get hounded. They're allowed to get the best jobs.
Yeah.
They're allowed to get involved in every single avenue of political work or the political scene, and no one says anything. Yeah. So we live in a world of hypocrisy. And I think while we shouldn't be afraid, I think the problem we have, and I think I see this in our immediate community, is there's fear and there's intimidation. People take a step back. They're like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to do public speaking because why should I risk this? Yeah. Why should I risk that? I shouldn't get involved in these campaigns. I should refrain from getting involved in anything at all because why should I risk my job or why should I risk this? I think it's because of that fear and that anxiety we're seeing less people getting involved, especially in the Muslim community. And that reinforces the status quo that we're seeing right now. And I think the only way we can change that is by being a bit braver. I think I'll mention on LinkedIn, Deloitte, one of the big four, posted a very, very shockingly supportive post, very supportive of Israel because of what happened. When was it? On the 7th of November?
October.
7th of October. And it was a complete disregard of all the bombing and the occupation that the Palestinians were facing. And people within Deloitte actually went on LinkedIn and started replying to that very post. And I think we saw some of the leaders of the Deloitte Muslim network who have quite significant positions within the company quoting the post and saying that this does not represent us and really, let's say, clapping back at this post. And I think that kind of bravery is what we need to see more because people shouldn't be getting away with overlooking the plight of those who are victims of oppression and occupation, and it shouldn't be normalized. But
I mean, you talk about hypocrisy, and hypocrisy is quite it's a powerful word, but it's extremely apt and appropriate in this particular context. Especially, I mean, you mentioned the fact that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of young Brits, men and women, traveling every year to Israel to serve either in a kibbutz or in the IDF or to volunteer for whatever work. And that is regarded as a plus on their CVs. They highlight this, they bring this up, they put this in bold so that it's seen. And it's regarded as a very important stepping stone in the lives of those young people. Yet you wouldn't ever imagine someone who hails, I don't know, from Argentina, for instance, or from Korea, putting on their CV that, we spent a year or 6 months serving in the South Korean army or Argentinian army, or that we took part in any kind of military escapades by a foreign country. I mean, that would be seen definitely as being outrageous. Problematic.
Yeah, I mean, we saw...
Probably even treacherous.
Yeah, of course. When the call-up started to happen from the IDF, a young lady posted, I think, she's from the UK. She posted a video where she's just arrived in the airport, I think, and she's saying, my friends just got killed and I'm going to go and partake in the IDF and so on and so on and so on. And they act like this is very normal. Yeah. They're very proud of it. But I think what they don't realize is that later on, the attitudes will change. The fact of the matter is that this is a force that's committed several war crimes over a huge span of time.
Yeah. Continuous.
And it's continuous. And the people in power may overlook it now. Yeah. But when the ICJP start issuing warnings and people start taking these things seriously, They will have to.
You mean warning of taking legal action?
Yeah,
against
legal
them?
action to, in support of such war crimes. Those very same people that are young and naive and are going and getting involved will realize what a mistake it will be. It's just a matter of time, because at the end of the day, the wave of justice, it carries on, and it takes everyone with it, regardless of who they are. And people don't realize, and they don't learn from history. I think the Palestinian struggle has obviously prolonged. It's become quite a long battle. But like every other journey in history repeats itself.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely.
So we just people need to also realize that they need to stand on the right side.
Yeah. And
can we, sorry for interrupting, can we talk about the situation?
Of course. This was going to be my next question, because you have family there.
Yeah.
And directly, you have direct contact, I still hope that you do, with your family, relatives and friends in Gaza. And the situation is dire, there's no doubt. But give us a little bit more detail.
So just on the 22nd of September 2023, a month ago, Netanyahu was in the United Nations headquarters. He raised a Palestine map with only Israel on it. And he said this is the new Middle East.
Yeah.
So Netanyahu was checking the world.
Yeah.
How the world will be reacting to erasing Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, or the Palestinian. And the world was clapping to him.
Yeah.
So what the Gazan and the Palestinian are seeing now, it's a plan.
Yeah.
So the Palestinians are seeing a plan, which, by the way, it's not a new plan. In 1956, I guess, the Israelis and the part of the Palestinian neighbors were planning to move the Palestinian in Gaza to Sinai in Egypt.
Yeah.
So that was 75 or 70 years ago. So it's ongoing. So what Netanyahu did last month, what the previous Israeli government have done, it's a continuous plan. What Trump was planning to do, it's all ongoing. So what we are seeing now, this is why I feel the world is silent, because they know this, they have read this, they have accepted this. So the Western countries, no one has mentioned anything about keeping Gazas in Gaza. No one has mentioned the right of return, because most of the Gazan, 80% of them are refugees, are from villages, cities are erased. So my grandmother is from a city called Java. Now it's Tel Aviv. Yeah. So no one has mentioned my grandmother's suffering for the last 75 years. And when my grandmother was kicked out of her village, they told her the same what they are saying now. You will be leaving for 2 days. We will clean the area and you will come back. 75 years. My grandmother died 10 years ago. 75 years ago, no one has returned. So this is the political side. About the humanitarian, my brother is the only plastic surgeon in Gaza who worked in the St. Thomas Hospital. He was working here. He was getting a very high salary. He decided to move last January to Gaza to build the first plastic and reconstruction surgery department in the main hospital in Gaza, in Al-Shifa. So he is a hero. He went there. He was doing the operation here with, do you know how many plastic surgeon consultants in St. Thomas? Like maybe 50, 70 consultants every day inside the hospital. Yeah. He went there. He's the only consultant there. He have received support from Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, who's a plastic surgeon going to Gaza every couple of months. But what I'm saying, in the UK, he was having 50, 70 plastic surgeon consultant in the same hospital. There he have people coming every couple of months. He decided to start this move because, with these Israeli airstrikes and other, lots of people lose their legs or head. So the reconstruction, burns. The reconstruction is very important for them. Yeah. And my brother, I was crying when he was calling me. He said, Omar, we the surgeons have to clean the medical tools for the operation because the hospital has no electricity. They stopped what they call it, to protect from bacteria. Of
course. They have to sterilize.
They put it in hot places.
And sterilize.
Yeah. So they stopped doing this and they clean it now. And you can imagine for an 18 hours or 16 hours operation for reconstruction to use unclean materials for operation, 100% the body will be infected and the operation will be. But they use their best. They use sometimes the fire. They use stuff to to clean. This is about the situation. About I lost my cousin who's 75 years old. She was a high court judge. She's retired. She's a female high court judge. She to be a judge. She have more than 50 years experience as a lawyer and as a judge. Her husband, his name is Fehmi Al-Najjar, was a judge as well. He was around 75 years old. Their son Muhammad was a lawyer. He filed a legal case on the International Criminal Court about the Israeli siege on Gaza. He filed that in June 2023. His other brother was an engineer. So the whole family. So Muhammad has 6 sons and daughters, and Faris have another 4. So 10 plus 2 plus 2, 14 people we lost. Yesterday as well, I lost my mother's sister, my aunt's daughter. She was with her in-laws, so she lost her, Hiba was killed, her 3 children, her husband, her husband's brothers, their fathers, and every family has been. So Israel is now doing ethnic cleansing. No one has mentioned these names. So now the problem, my mom was saying, your aunties just want to see, because my aunt is in Rafah, which is in South Gaza, and they are in different areas. She said she doesn't want to see her daughter, but she wants to know that her daughter were burned and have her body have been founded. And because there is no equipment, no fuel, now the Palestinian, with the bulldozers, they don't. So if they know there are killed bodies there, they don't remove it. They say, let's keep the petrol we have for the people who are still alive under the demolished houses. So the situation, and last thing, I was speaking with them, they said yesterday we slept without having food. I'm saying they have no food at all, no electricity, no water, no food. And you can imagine with people with diseases, or some people with diabetes, people with cancer, they need the treatment. It's
and therefore the constant claim by whether it be politicians or whether it be by media anchors, whether knowingly or otherwise, but the kind of whatever they talk about, and then they add within the realms of international law, that all of this, the starving of people, of cutting off electricity from schools and from places where vulnerable people are being treated, which is an overt war crime, but they make sure to add within international law. It's absolutely ridiculous.
As if that wipes away everything that's happened.
Absolutely.
And how do you wipe out the trauma?
Absolutely.
And the loss that Omar Mufid, his family had.
So obviously there are the Palestinians who have family and the such, and you deal with a youthful community who travel, who have relatives, who know people, who what is the impact of what's happening in Palestine generally, in Gaza specifically, on the students and youth population here in the UK?
It's made people very angry. It's stirred up people's emotions. It's got them really riled up. People are waiting for any opportunity to go out on the streets. They know that that's really the least, but also at this current climate, maybe the most that they can do. We've seen actually more flare-ups at universities, incidents where students are now being brought into disciplinaries because of their anger. They've gone out and they've been vocal, and people have made complaints about certain things that they might have said. I think the youth and the student community are responsive, but I think it's all in a reactionary manner. I think what tends to happen is when events like this happen, when calamities like these strike, and there's a huge, amount of killing and so on, people's senses get activated. The issue is when things quiet down and things get calmer, people just tend to turn back into some sort of hive. And that's what we're trying to work on in the community, is to know you have to be as engaged throughout. There's ways to do that. And that's why, for example, the PSC are very, very, very active. And they're quite proactive in the way they do things. When they aren't organizing protests, they're taking people to court, or they're campaigning, or they're doing something. And we need to stop being reactive, and we need to carry on being proactive. And I think if we are able to use this momentum for the sake of doing that, then we're doing something right. So we're keen on training people. And I think we're
educating.
Educating. You know, I think while we need to get people up to date on why this is happening right now, we need to go back in history as well, because without that, there's no foundation.
True.
So it's educating people about the origin of this struggle. It's not a conflict. It's
you talk about history. I mean, this is one of the issues that we constantly, do battle with particularly with the media and politicians, is that every single time something happens, it's assumed that this is the beginning.
From the beginning, when Israeli man has killed. This how. But regarding the history, yesterday I was looking at the kind of the neutral Channel 4. So they were putting Palestine, Israel, simplify. They said after the the Ottoman Empire has been collapsed in Palestine, Britain have ruled Palestine. Britain promised to create something called the State of Palestine. So it was never there. So this is Channel 4 saying. So Britain has promised to create something called the State of Palestine, which was never created, and promised to create something called the State of Israel, which is now created. So the Palestinians are waiting for their first baby to be born, which is the State of Palestine. This is they are trying to be with the Palestinian, and they spread the lies and
two-state
not two-state. Palestine was there all the time with my grandfather studied in 1935 in the Jerusalem teacher academy, which was in Palestine before before everyone comes to Palestine. It was the Palestinian with Khalil Sakakini and all the Palestinian scholars. But I mean, Channel 4 was saying that Palestine was a baby that was about to be created by Britain in 1948, but Britain did not do it. But this is the Israeli narrative that Palestine was never there.
You know, the interview, I remember this interview because I've watched it so many times. I watched it the first time when I was about probably 14 or 15 years old, when Golda Meir, the first prime minister of Israel, when she said that she was Palestinian. She was a Palestinian. She said, I carried a Palestinian passport from 1921 all the way until 1948 for 27 years. She was a Palestinian.
And people that are born in Palestine will see it even on their British licenses or their passports. The fact of the matter is, and this is why we go back to the idea of education, the importance of education, evidence and facts, history is on the side of the Palestinians.
True.
And those who are in the struggle. But the problem is with a lack of education, a lack of reinforcing that kind of information, you won't be able to see that or promote that. But I think what we're starting to see as well is over time, people are becoming more educated. Okay. Therefore, when people are being interviewed by the same mainstream media that are, let's say, propagandists for Israel, unfortunately, the responses aren't what these media outlets are expecting. These people are more educated.
And they are becoming more intelligent, more shrewd. I mean, people are coming up with incredibly genuine answers in a way that is taking people aback, that it's taking them by surprise.
100%.
So it's something that will continue to dominate, and it will be something that I'm sure you two, especially because of your backgrounds, because of where you hailed from, but also I sense that the issue of Palestine is something that resonates far and wide. That many students from college to university to people who work, young people, the issue of Palestine is something which is capturing people's imagination. They see through the lies and the smoke screens. You mentioned the fact that they're finding alternative news sources and news streams to follow news from. And also, you know, we live in a world where social media is dominant. People are communicating with their peers from inside Palestine.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're getting the images and they're getting the sounds and they're getting, you know, all the information directly from who is actually there.
I think the Israeli government and the IDF have thought that by, you know, cutting off these necessities, they'd be able to, you know, remove or disconnect or sever Gaza from the world.
Yeah.
But actually they're failing.
Yeah.
Because while for example, if we talk about the hospital bombing yesterday, the IDF tried to promote a certain narrative that it wasn't them. They actually failed because initially they posted admitting
They warned the hospital.
Yeah, they admitted that they warned the hospital, and then afterwards they removed that tweet and then started to say that it wasn't them. But actually, there were videos from in Gaza showing that there was a bomb, and you can hear the whistle of the bomb while it was landing.
Yes.
And then military experts came out and used that video to debunk Israel's claim.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can cut off the communication, it's no longer something you can do. We're not relying on Morse codes or signals now. We are able to get information from the ground, whether the aggressor or the oppressor likes it or not.